And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 262. The clocks have changed here in the UK, and I'm guessing that's probably thrown a couple of people out. However, if you do happen to be watching live, leave me a comment, let me know you're here, and we can make a start. Today is going to be all about the leaves challenge that I set 2 weeks ago. So, yes, let's make a start. So yes, welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 262. Today, the Leaves Challenge. So 2 weeks ago, I talked quite in depth about the myriad of different ways you can photograph leaves, from close-up macro to wide landscapes and seasonal changes. It doesn't have to be seasonal change, but certainly here in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment, there is big seasonal change going on, which gives lots of opportunities. And then I set a challenge, and we've had about a dozen people or so send in images for it. So, but like I say, if you happen to be watching live, then leave a comment, let me know you're here, let me know what the weather's doing, let me know what the leaves are like in your corner of the world. But also, even if you're not watching live, you can still join in, leave comments on YouTube here, and just down below, kind of go along. If you've got comments on any of the images, thoughts, interests, inspirations, then let me know. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, but certainly the like side of it helps, I think, with the immediate algorithms as well. So please do that. So yes, I'm looking over here, looking at the comments. It looks like I have Viji said hi, Jack said hi from Wisconsin, and then Viji said the time changes for today. Jack said having trouble getting on. Lisa said hello from Maryland. So these were all before I started. So I'm guessing this whole hour shift bit has thrown everything out somewhat. However, we do have some actual comments coming in just now. So Robert Schaefer joins us, says, good morning, people. It's cool and foggy in Dallas this morning. April says, greetings from a sunny Long Island, New York. But she won't be able to stay too long today. I think timings are out. However, from next week, it looks like the US clocks go back and so realign. So if you happen to be over in Canada or the USA, I think it will be back to the usual kind of time gap. Anyway, it's always 3 p.m. UK time here on a Sunday. So always worth, if you're ever slightly unsure in the morning, just Google time difference between UK and wherever you are, and that should give you a more accurate time sense of what's going on. What else do we have? John Harvey says, hello all from Columbus, Ohio. Fall weather has arrived. Susan says, hello from a wet and chilly Kakubri. And of course, Kakubri is just 9 miles down the road from here in Castle Douglas. And she's right. Here, it's very much the same. Wet and chilly. It feels really quite wintry now, it has to be said. Colorado views images, which is Marilyn. I think, yes, Marilyn says, hello from a chilly but sunny Colorado. And then Nicola started saying something, but then has message retracted. Okay, so I don't know quite what happened there. Okay, Robert joins, other Robert from Texas joins, says, happy birthday, Kim. Thank you very much, Robert. That was yesterday. Yes, so I turned 59 yesterday, my last year of the decade of my 50s. So yes, but I had a good day. Had a good day with my daughter Meg and my wife Maggie, and lots of chocolate was consumed. Where are we? So Robert also says, howdy all from a cold and overcast Texas. Jack says, got it. Happy days. Right, so joined us. April also says happy belated birthday, as does Lisa and Viji also. And Janet says hi from a cool Mississauga in Canada. And Nicola says hi everyone from a wintry southwest Scotland. So this is great. So we have people in, we have pictures to look at. Viji says it's cyclone time in Chennai. Oh gosh. Okay, well I hope you're all safe there in southern India there, Viji. Right, so where are we going to start with this? So yes, today is the leaf challenge. So we're photographing leaves. So like 2 weeks ago, I did this big section on many different ways you can photograph leaves, and part of the fun of that is that they are freely available, even if you're not worrying about seasonal change. Practically every plant has a leaf of some kind, and there's things you can do from going abstract to still life to macro to contextual. There's lots of different ways you can tackle the notion of leaves. And also, periodically, if you're one of these who does the kind of online photo competitions like Photo Crowd, Guru Shots, Viewbug, these sites which have daily competitions, then by and large it's just a matter of time before the topic of leaves will crop up as well. So, and I think it's something you can practice and try out different things on. So I thought we would have a go at doing that. So we've had a dozen people or so send in their images of leaves. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through, see how other people have attempted this particular topic, maybe get a bit of inspiration from, get some ideas of seeing how you might have done it yourself. At the end of it, what I will do is we'll have a crowd vote. I'll go back through the images and you can let me know which one your favourite one is. Yeah, because actually there is also that notion of the Smug Points, because in our current Smug Points leaderboard, Robert is, for so far in October, is in the lead with 40 Smug Points. Anne is on 30, Nurije is on 25, Nadia, Meg and Janet are all on 15. But that will all change, because anybody who sent in an image for this podcast automatically gets a 10 Smug Points for entering the challenge. If you happen to be here live now, leaving a comment as we go, then you get a bonus 5 Smug Points. So if you sent in something and you comment, there you go, straight up to 15. At the end, when we'll do a crowd vote, whoever gets the crowd vote image will get a bonus 20 Smug Points. And then I'm going to give you my top 3 with a bonus 30, 20 and 10 as well. And maybe a couple of commendeds for an extra 5. So loads of Smug Points to be earned on this particular podcast. And at the end of that, because this is the last podcast of October, the person who's accumulated the most Smug Points, and at this point I've got no idea, we'll have to work it out afterwards, will get to choose the topic and challenge for November. So all to play for. Stick around and we'll find out all what's going on at the end of the podcast. So, right, okay, let's make a start then. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start. Okay, let me click on that. Tell you what, let me rearrange my desktop a little bit here so that I can have a little bit of, get a sense of what's going on. Move that, move that, move that. And if I'm really lucky, then all I need to do is click that. No, not that one. I'm not that lucky. Right, that's what I wanted. And now I click that. And with luck, you ought to be able to see April's photo. So this one is from April in Long Island, New York, and April says, "Here is my submission for the leaf challenge. I took this picture of these autumn leaves in the morning sun. It's taken in the parking lot at my job." And yes, that's great. And I like that kind of notion of, here you are, you're turning up for your job first thing in the morning and you're noticing the leaves, sun's coming through, take advantage of it. And the colours really are gorgeous. If you're talking about that idea of autumn leaves, one look at this, we absolutely know that you're in the Northern Hemisphere, in that kind of cool morning, autumn, low sunlight with the changing colours of the leaves. Really quite beautiful. Love the way the light is coming through the leaves from behind, and we're getting so they're lighting up, but we're also getting the shadows of other leaves, like, on here, with the shadow of this leaf is casting into this one here as well. Lovely shot, really good way of sort of starting off this this podcast, I think. Susan says, "Gorgeous colours, April." Marilyn says, "Beautiful colours, April." Lisa says, "The sunlight really highlights those colours." And John says, "Love the sunlight on these, April." Excellent. Well, yeah, it's a good start, I think. So thank you for sending those ones in. Oh, Viji says, "Lovely photo, April, lighting up the leaves." And April says, "Thank you, everyone." Right. Okay. So next up then, what I want to do is we'll go to Robert Schaefer in Texas. And we have this rather lovely minimalist idea, which so Robert says, "I've always enjoyed photographing leaves, and after watching the replay of your podcast, I can say that I've tried just about all of the different scenarios you've covered. So I have a lot of leaf images, and it was hard to pick one. I finally settled on this one. This was taken in our pool at the house in 2020 during the COVID lockdown. I was outside doing something and I saw this single leaf floating along in the pool. I liked it, so I went back in and got my camera. And that's great. That's, and again, is that noticing, because an awful lot of large part of photography is the noticing it. Is actually tuning your eye and actually seeing something where you go, not just that looks interesting, but that could look interesting in the camera. And what Robert's done here is he's isolated it. So he could have just as easily, another version of this shot could have been taking a shot where you've got the edge of the pool, he's come down lower, you've got a sense of more of the landscape. And instead he's brought the camera up, so you've just got the leaf floating in the pool. And because the leaf has got this kind of yellowy brown, you get that complementary colours offset against the blue of the pool as well. So yeah, really nice kind of shot there. One or two little things on the editing. I'm not totally sure, Robert, but just something to watch out for. Here, there's a little kind of mark there, and there's one or two, maybe over here, I'm not sure, which kind of betray the idea that what you might have been doing is using a heel tool or something just to take out something, because certainly if you've got a pool like this, there might be, and it could be whether it's like a tiny little bit of leaf or a dead fly, or even just a kind of an air bubble or something like that. You quite often find that so you just move it. But when you've got a background like this, sometimes it just sort of the tools don't quite line up, and it's something we can miss quite easily. So I would keep an eye out for that. In fact, let me just where's open with Photoshop for a moment. So you see, I mean, if I take the healing tool and I just sort of randomly drag it across, sometimes it works, sometimes it leaves a sort of like a little hard line, which you wouldn't normally get. And this has got that kind of feeling of just a hard line. And if I just click on that, yeah, sort of, or you maybe want to do it 2 or 3 times just to sort of get something out of the way. But just a little thought there, Robert, on what's otherwise a really interesting photo. So yeah, thanks for sending that one in. Comments we have, April says, love the blue against the leaf. Susan says, loving the style, Robert. Lisa says, very artistic, love it. Viji says, wow, leaf floating in a pool. Nicola says, love the simplicity of the pool shot. Oh, Meg's joined us and says, hello, everyone. And Robert says, thanks, everyone. Took a bunch of those little things out. Missed that one. It's just so easily done. But yeah, other than that, I think it's, yeah, really nice shot. So yeah, thank you for sending that one in, Robert. Next, I'm going to go to Jack, I think. So Jack sent in this one and says, from my car window, the bright colour just made me stop. I know I could have moved the trash plant on the left side, but did not belong to me in somewhere, just someone else's yard. This gave me backlight and also shows the plant in different lights of the day. So yeah, a bunch of kind of things going on here. So this is one of those where, oh, look at that splash of colour, the red, nicely sort of offset against the green in the background, and you pull over, you sort of, it's still in the car, you get your camera out or your phone out, take a shot. There's maybe a couple of other things in the way, so you're trying to sort of crop this bit, cut that bit, all the rest. But yeah, nicely found, I think. I mean, basically it comes down to this leaf. I don't know whether you did a little bit of dodge on the leaf or something just to bring it out, or whether it's just the light's naturally coming through there, but it grabs the attention. April says, I like the red and green theme on this shot. Marilyn says, great colours. Lisa says, the lights hitting the red leaf really help make the picture. John says, red leaves are nice. Susan says, love those red leaves, Jack. They contrast well against the green. Nice bits of texture here as well on the actual stem of the plant too. And I quite like that. And you can sort of see on the left here, sort of slightly more textured. And I think then the sort of almost like the softness of the leaf contrasts against that kind of slightly more spiky texture as well. So yeah, nice shot there, Jack. So thanks for sending that one in. Right, how we... Oh yeah, Jack says, thank you, did not touch up. Okay, yeah, so that's kind of straight as it came out. Right, next up then, we have Janet. And Janet also, Janet went close up. Janet went for the macro. So we've got frost on a leaf here. And what's always really lovely about this is where you've got these crystals, the frost crystals, right, just kind of on the outer edges. There's some in the middle, but it's that kind of icing sugar, kind of almost like dipped in on the edges of the leaves. You can see it on some of the leaves there as well. So Janet says, I attached my submission for the leaf challenge. I did try and get a new image, but without success. My submission is an image I would like to try to shoot again, or something similar. But the biggest challenge is getting the right conditions, or a weekend morning when I don't need to be somewhere early. I mean, well, this is always part of the problem, is we can have ideas of the shot we want to have, but sometimes life gets in the way. Our work schedule, our life schedule doesn't tie up with the weather schedule. So sometimes the kind of shot we want to get, we've got to hunt down. Sometimes we've just got to be very patient. I mean, it's like this year, you know, it's now cold. It's windy. There's a particular road I walk along where each day I've been walking along, there's been less and less leaves on the trees. And yet we've still not really had a frost yet. Not one but that's still been around by the time I've got up in the morning. So we've actually, you know, it's quite strange to get towards the end of October and still not have a frost. So the idea of that frosted leaf, there just hasn't been an opportunity here in Scotland. Whereas in other years, I would have had plenty of chances to get a shot like this, and that would have been interesting. So sometimes it's the weather conditions don't line up with your own kind of personal lifestyle schedule. So lovely shot that. Yeah, nice. That macro though, that getting in, and it really sort of helps sort of show up the lines, you know, the veins of the leaf and all those little crystals. So yeah, thanks for sending that one in, Janet. Comments now. We've got Viji says lovely colour. I took one similar recently. Lisa says lovely. April says, very pretty, Janet. Susan says, oh, love a frosty image. Viji says, a beautiful Janet. Frost. Yeah, oh, yeah, well, yes, of course, because Viji wouldn't have taken a shot like this unless you're referring to the previous shot. I never know exactly when these comments turn up in time with the shot on the screen, because I have to look back on different parts of the screen here. Yes, unlikely to be having a frosty image in Chennai at the moment, I would have thought. Where are we? Yes to frost. Great shot of frosty leaves, says John. Viji says winning shot, very impressed. Nicola says beautiful crisp and cool image, the reds contrast nicely. Jack says love this shot, and Janet says I don't think we've had any frost either. Further north would have been a possibility, but only on a work day so far. Right, okay, so next up then we're going to move through to where are we? To John. And John sent in this one. Says, this photo I took on my recent road trip. It was in Quebec, right near New Brunswick, where I was staying. Taken on Quebec on 25th of September, so nearly a month ago now, or just over a month ago. The colour that far north was really nice and did not seem to suffer from the drier conditions further south. We're at a museum, and this was taken in the parking lot. I have hundreds of fall colour pics, and it is a favourite subject. I particularly like the birch and aspen because of the contrasting tree trunks. The coloured ferns around the base of the trees makes for a nice fill, I think. And yeah, this is nice and colourful. As you say, it's not, you've got the colours of the leaves themselves, but you've also got the different kind of trunks that are appearing as well. So yeah, really nice, colourful autumn fall shot. One of the things I would feel with this, though, John, is that there's a sort of feeling, I think, with the balance of this. It feels like, because the trees come out here, I want to have more space off to the right. Now, interestingly, John did send me the unedited images of this, where you can see the colours need to come up. But there's something I quite like about the shape over on the right. I like this. It feels like it's sort of bunched a little bit too far up on the right of the picture, and I want to have more space out. And we've got the car park down here, which isn't doing overly much for us, but when we're in here, I quite like the sweep of the colours, and part of the bit over on the left is slightly less important. So if we just open that up for a moment, and I'd be kind of much more tempted to just almost bring this in. Now we've got a little bit of, we've got this little bench here, but even that doesn't matter too much. I think maybe I would sort of be tempted to have a shape slightly more like this. It's just this notion of having the picture, because the way the trees go, I tend to feel you want to have this bright patch of colour on the left, and it sweeps down in some really nice colours over on the right as well. So then if you were to take that and then you were to sort of play around with your hue and saturate, you know, sort of boost the saturation a little bit, play with the contrast, do the usual kinds of bits and pieces that you might do with the editing. I think a shape like this works slightly better. Your original square crop feels like it's sort of, especially because of the way these trees are leaning here, it sort of feels like it's leaning over to the left. And there's, I don't know, yeah, it's just really kind of feeling like I want more space to the right of this rather than on the left. And when you kind of create this, I think there's more to be done with the trees over on the right, and kind of creating the sweep of line with this. But lovely that you caught the colours getting, and it's nice when you get the kind of the different styles of trees where the colours are all a slightly different place, and you're really rich, vibrant. So yeah, lovely find that. So thanks for sending that one in, John. Well, comments here. Where are we? Susan says, what beautiful trees, John. Colours are beautiful. Viji says, beautiful colours. You're lucky to witness this. Lisa says, great find. That's where I need to be to find vibrant colours that are reachable. And John says, always interesting to get another opinion. I will play with the crop. Excellent. Okay, let me close that. And then I think what we will do is we will move on to Lisa. Now, a totally different style of photo. Lisa sent in this one and said, I've been doing a great deal of still life photography, so I decided to give it a try with leaves in art. So this is quite an interesting one as well. So we've got a vase, we've got leaves, we're sitting on a book, leaves scattered about, got a table, but one of the things that's really been done here is that there's a strong textured overlay. Now, I don't know whether you've got a particular place, whether you've got a separate textured image which you've put onto it and played with the layers, or whether there's a particular effect in the editing program that you click on to do. So what Lisa's done here is gone for a very kind of painterly feel, and the texture that's been added gives this kind, you can see here as we kind of move in, gives this kind of almost kind of canvas, old canvas feel to it. Now, this is one of those things where to try and give a bit of feedback is you can make it look like a paint. It does make it look much more like a painting. It moves it away from photography. And I think it's, if you are trying to create, you can create photos that have a painterly feel, or you can photograph paintings. But sometimes I think where you've got, there's a line between where you draw the balance, and it can be fun, I think, to take a picture and then make it look very painted, in this case, make it look like a painting, except for the fact that I think we've lost something of the photography side of it. Now, I'm very aware that this is down to a degree of personal taste. Okay, so it's not to say that you're wrong. It's to say that the way I'm viewing it from my perspective is, because I have plenty of podcasts as well where I use very much painterly styles, and I even applied textured overlays to kind of give a little bit more of a hint of it. But mostly what I'm still trying to do is make sure that it's anchored quite strongly in the fact that it's photography. This feels like it's kind of gone and I would be interested to see the original. And I think if you just pared back a little bit on that textured overlay, you could still have some of it, But I think, make the most of the fact that it's a camera you're using, whether it's a camera on your phone or a DSLR, whatever it is, and use the tropes, use the styles of still life painting to trigger the ideas of still life painting. But I think sometimes you have to be slightly careful. It's like there are all these different effects you can get. It's like there's plenty of effects in Photoshop, say, where I could take a picture and then I can convert it so that it looks like a pen and ink drawing. And that's fine. But it's, to my mind, is taking it away from, you're into kind of graphic design, you're into using it for something slightly different. So I like the picture, and I think if it was just toned back a little bit in terms of the texture, I think I would probably like it a bit more. I mean, it's an interesting photo, and I'm really pleased you've sent it in, Lisa. I think, I'm just saying that I think it's maybe worth thinking about the level at which it's one of those things that I think we can all fall guilty of, is we take a photo and then we sort of apply some effect to it a little bit, and we go, oh, that looks interesting. And then we apply it a bit more and we go, oh, that looks even more interesting. Then we apply it a bit more and it looks even more interesting. But each time we're making reference to the previous version of it. Whereas if you then go back and look at the original, by that time, we've gone an awful long way away from it. So I think sometimes we need to come back to the original, refer to the original and say, how far away are we stretching it from where the photo is? But yeah, no, it's an interesting kind of whole philosophical debate on this. But I thought I would raise that, and this is a useful photo to raise that on. But yeah, no, but I like the composition of it. I do have to say I like the composition with the way the kind of using the rule of thirds with where the vase is and the way the leaves sweep down in a curve as well. So I hope that all makes sense. Comments, we say, where are we? Viji says painterly feel. Marilyn says beautiful, Lisa. April says very creative still life. Susan says gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Lisa, great texture. John says nice idea for a still life. Viji says looks very beautiful. Robert Schaefer says very nice, Lisa. Impressionist style. April says everyone have a great week. I'll watch the rest later. Enjoy the rest of your day, April. Nicola says, I like the still life concept. Lisa says, using textured, thanks so much for the feedback. I often do wonder when it's too much. Thanks all. Yeah, like I say, there is the personal taste, and there's where you're placing it, really. I mean, this is another key aspect of it. And I think one of the things is that if you're just enjoying it for your own self, then that's great. That's not a problem. You like it, it's great. If you were to be putting this into a photography competition, I think that's where it would kind of play against you. It's sort of moved too far away from photography or looking like a photograph. And I think you might find yourself just not making up the level of votes or marks or whatever that you would hope to with it. But yeah, always with these things, one of the aspects of photography is who's going to be looking at it and what reaction do you want from the person that's going to be looking at it, or what reaction do you want from the people who are going to be looking at it. So where's it going to be placed? How's it going to be used? And exactly the same photo could score really well in one environment and just not be suitable in a different environment. So there's no ultimate right or wrong with this, but what tends to be is where it's going to appear will make a difference in how it's received. So hope that all makes sense. But yeah, thanks for sending that one in. Right, next image then I'm going to go to is Marilyn. And I must admit, I really do love this one. This is like April's. We've got the backlight, we've got those beautiful colours, but Marilyn's gone for a slightly more simplistic way. We've got a blue sky background, a few leaves just softly in the background there, and it's sort of touching on. Although there's several leaves, there's making the most of the negative space really with this as well, so that those sort of orangey, reddy, yellow leaves really stand out against the blue background. So it's almost like a sort of a cross between Robert Schaefer's leaf in the pool and April's leaves out in the parking lot. So yeah, rather lovely that one, Marilyn. I like that kind of colour exchange. Lisa says, what was that? Oh, yes, good to know. Okay, Viji says this is perfect. Susan says yellows and blues work really well together, Marilyn. Good use of space too. And Nicola says, I love the use of negative space. So, yeah, excellent. Thanks for that. So, how are we doing? Well, actually, John says, nice shot, Marilyn. I like your shot. So just a little reminder then that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining even, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can support these podcasts. And of course, don't forget to invite your friends and click the like, click the subscribe, all the usual things. So, okay, where are we going to go to next? Marilyn says, thanks so much, everyone. So next up then, I'm going to move on to Meg. And Meg has gone for a street scene. No, not that one. That one. And so, yes, this is a kind of fun one here. So Meg says, well, Meg's just straightforwardly said, hi, Dad. I took this photo of autumn leaves in Castle Douglas for this challenge. And what Meg has done here is she's gone for the street scene. So rather than picking out an individual leaf or leaves hanging off a branch, she's gone for the entire. So what we can see here is we've got this perspective shoot going down the length of the pavement, and we've got the leaves that have come off and then covering the sidewalk. Viji says, is that your car, Kim? Yellow? No, it's not my one. My car is slightly more orange than that. I've got a sort of volcanic orange is the official colour of my Mini. This isn't a Mini. This is that actually. Oh, it's a Vauxhall. But slightly different colour. I don't think my one is it. No, my one's not in shot in here. But yeah, actually, it's quite nice that it sort of matches the colour of the leaves on the ground as well. I think it's always a tricky one when you've got cars in a street because cars can kind of grab the attention and pull you off to one side. I think what would have also been lovely would have been if the sun had been coming through and just clipping these leaves and really pulling out the colour. But like a lot of these things, you can't always get the weather the way you want them. But there is something nice about that kind of the leading lines leading you straight down the street into the picture and all these leaves covering. You've got the benches just sort of sitting there as well. In fact, actually, there's a point here where I think a shot like this becomes quite interesting as well, where if you're really wanting to get the leaves across the pavement and to focus in on something like the bench, I think. Whether that's got leaves on or the leaves have come off the bench, but all the leaves that are around it, I think also we're getting in a little bit of the base of the tree trunks. Something like that, I think, could also make quite an interesting photo in its own right. But otherwise, this one's very much about it's the leaves in the street, and that then becomes your narrative. What else have we got? Nicola says, great shot, Meg. The yellow car really is a bonus. Susan says, that captures the autumn scene very well, Meg. Love it. John says, good eye, Meg. Pretty street scene. Lisa says, really like the perspective. Pulls us down the walkway. And Viji says, the bench, yellow car and leaves truly screams autumn is here. Yes, it does. It's true. Okay, what we're going to do now is move on to Nadia. And Nadia sent in this one. And Nadia says, this close-up image is my submission for the challenge. And she also sent a second image, which was this one, which is, so this is the plant it's from. And in fact, actually, I'm not sure whether this is actually the same, whether it's sort of zoomed in like that and cropped, or whether it was taken as a second image, possibly taken as a second image. But it's that same image, same bit of sort of zoom in and crop. So she says the second image is the plant with the black backlight coming through, which caught my eye in the Explorer's Garden in Pitlochry, which is up in in Scotland, just north of where Nadia lives. It's kind of hard for me to move around. It was kind of hard for me to move around to help me see what the image would look like on the phone screen because of the position of the plant. I did end up holding the branch in order to manipulate it so that I could as much as I could without damaging the plant or standing in places I was not supposed to, but still being able to get the backlight against the leaf. Absolutely. I mean, I know that feeling, you know. So you've got a plant here, you're trying to take a photo of it. So you're standing on tiptoe, and sometimes you're kind of just hooking a little bit with your finger over here or something like that, just to kind of pull it a bit closer because nothing's quite exactly where you need it to be. She says it was still a hit and miss though, as I could not see it on the phone. And of course, that's the other problem. If you've got the sunlight, which is coming from behind, and you're trying to angle it on your phone and all the rest of it. So given all your restrictions, I think you've done extraordinarily well there, Nadia. So what did catch my eye was how the sun made the red veins on the back of the leaf stand out against the yellow-green of the leaf. I think the close-up one turned out not too bad despite the obstacles I had to overcome. That's an interesting one, this, Nadia, because actually, yes, I think as a kind of quick glance, this really stands out. Those reds and yellows. Part of the problem here, though, is that the quality isn't really there. And there's an interesting point here about the notion of an image which will look good on a phone screen or a small screen, but if you're looking at it on a large desktop screen, or even if you were to print it out, doesn't necessarily carry through. And in that sense, on a print level or a larger screen, this one I think actually maybe works slightly better. I quite like the background, I quite like the, you know, and there's more quality to this. So yeah, in fact, I'll tell you what, I know what I'll do. Once I've gone through the photos, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you them all together en masse, because there's another little trick that I want to talk about with this. Where are we? So comments here. Meg says, thank you for your lovely comments, everyone. And then she goes on to say, this one's an absolutely gorgeous photo. Susan says, striking image, Nadia. Love the way it comes out at the bottom corner. Viji says, the veins pop out and the colour really is beautiful. Marilyn says, great close-up composition and colours, Nadia. Viji says, close-up is good as there are no distractions. Robert says, I may be wrong, but it appears the reds are blown out. Now, okay, if we just take a look back here. I never heard of that before Nancy Mack of the Dallas Camera Club mentioned can happen. I'm not sure quite how that works. John says, very different, nice shot. Now, it is interestingly, there's a point here that actually reds can kind of become blown quite easily, in the sense that you can have a certain amount of detail, and when you start lightening them up, if you're lighting it up, the detail in the reds can disappear very quickly, even though you've still got the red. In fact, Susan's saying, I think reds can be really tricky, Rob, but I often have that problem. Can we sort of show what happened? I'll tell you what, let's just take this unedited one and open it in Photoshop for a moment to sort of show what happened. So we've got these reds here, okay, and we've got, there's quite a bit of detail in the reds, but the reds, they're fairly dullish compared to the other ones. So the editing thing, we might go in and we might go to the hue saturation, we might select the reds and we might decide to boost them. And as soon as we start to boost them, fine, we get richer reds, but actually, do you notice that a lot of that subtle detail starts to get lost? As we go black and white, you can see there's a lot of texture in these reds, and just boosting those reds a bit, they very quickly essentially blow out. And it is one of those things that tends to happen with reds more than any other colour. So as you boost the reds, you see we've started losing some of the details and the subtleties of the reds. And it is definitely is one of those things that is, can really be problematic. So yeah, something to watch out for there. And it's an interesting point you bring up there, Robert. Viji says, the spider web, saw that when Kim zoomed in, would be good to crop that as well. Hold on a sec. Where are we? Spider web. All right. Okay. Yes. Over here. So other options as well. Yes. Certainly with plants, if you've got little bits of spider web, then you've got to be really careful. You're trying to get the exact focal point, right? So that if you're wanting the threads to stand out in the place you want. A lot of plants have these little spider webs as well. So sometimes you can find interesting little insects, which are actually something that you don't notice at the point you're taking the photo, but afterwards, when you zoom in on the camera, zoom in on the computer, you suddenly find these little extras sitting in there. Oh, Robert says, thanks for the explanation. Excellent. Right. Okay. Yes. Now, next up then, Nicola. Now, this was an interesting one. I like this. Nicola says, this is my take on the leaf challenge. Originally, my goal was to experiment with the translucency of leaves, but with the distinct lack of natural sunlight here in Scotland, I decided to improvise. Placing a few leaves, I gathered, in a Pyrex dish of water. I shone some artificial light through from below. I then doubled up the layer, rotated, changed the opacity and multiply so the colours intensified and created a strange, almost abstract leafy world. I'm in between cameras just now, so this was taken on the phone. All good fun to do nevertheless. So what we've got here is, so Nicholas used a Pyrex dish with water, put the leaves in, shone a light through it. She's then taken that photo and then she's created another layer, changed the way it interacts with the layer with using a multiply function and rotating it so that changing the opacity between the layers. So she's done quite a bit of editing with this as well. So it really does become very abstract. Now she did actually also post the, this is the original photo. What we can see there's a cropping in here. We notice some of the details like this little hook of the leaf and this little kind of heart-shaped hole there as well, which then also kind of find their way into other bits over here. You see where it's being rotated, there's a sort of slight shadow of that hook of the leaf. So she's taken the photo, taken the layer, rotated the layer on top, and then sort of changed the opacity between the layers. So kind of a really fun way of playing and experimenting. Not just so double layers of experiment. First of all, experimenting with the notion of placing the leaves in water and shining a light through it, and then secondly, playing around with the edits as well. However, there's an interesting thing here, Nicola, which is, I must say, if I look at your original, there's lots in the original that I really like. I like the way the red and the yellows and the greens and what have you. There's something really nice about that colour combination. And while I do really like this, there's a feel, and you've got some of these bits of colours, there's a feeling that a lot of the colours have sort of moved into the middle ground, and the contrast that you have with your original has maybe been lost slightly. It's still a great photo, but it's just one of those things I would kind of keep in mind. Again, I think it's back to this idea that when we edit, we can get caught up in each level of edit feels slightly more interesting to the last edit. But if we're not too careful, our edits can take us so far away from the original that we can sometimes lose something in it. This original here has got now fine. I can understand you wanted to crop out the bit which looks more like the Pyrex dish. So you would maybe come in a bit closer or do something, find the crop that you want to have. But I love these yellows, and I love that green, and there's lovely bits of texture in the reds. There's something rich in this, Nicola, I think. And this is fun, don't get me wrong, I really enjoy it. But I wonder if there's something else you could put. I would say it's worth going back and exploring, play around with a little bit to see if you can get something of those original colours out. When you've taken because essentially by taking the duplicating the layer and rotating it and placing it back down, you're kind of removing the lighter and the dark. You're kind of pushing everything slightly more towards the centre ground of the tonal ranges or the colour ranges. Even I think that's kind of what's happened here a little bit. So the yellows aren't quite so yellow, the greens aren't quite so green. The reds have become slightly more intensified where the reds have overlaid the reds. But yeah, really interesting, and I like that idea. And yeah, thanks very much for sending that one in, Nicola. And hopefully and for everybody else watching this, it's that idea, that you can play around with, even in your house. Find a nice glass dish, place some things in, put light through it, or even place them in water and put light through it, and the whole kind of light quality changes. So if you're not out and about, or it's a dreary, wet, miserable day, but you've managed to pick out some leaves from the garden, then it gives you chances to play around in a kind of still life-like environment as well. So yeah, thanks for sending that one in, Nicola. What have we got? Okay, yeah, Susan says this is very clever and beautifully done. Nicola, Marilyn says great abstract. Viji says very interesting. I like this. I like the heart. Lisa says, wow, that was clever photography. Viji says, I like the one without the editors. The green and yellow complements it as well. John says, experimenting is always fun and interesting. Nicola says, very useful feedback. Thank you, Kim, and everyone. Viji also says, asked a friend who is at Utrecht to dry some leaves and bring them to me when she comes down. So Utrecht, oh, that's in Holland, isn't it? Yeah. I want to touch and feel the maple leaves. And Robert says, I really enjoy the abstract photo. Excellent. All right, next up, we are going to Nurije. And Nurije sent in this one, which is, so she says, this is my leaf challenge photo. I had other plans for this challenge, but unfortunately won't have time. So I'm sending this one, which I took a few weeks back in London at Regent's Park. So this is kind of a bit like an extended version of, well, like Marilyn's one, where we've got a few leaves with the blue sky background, or the kind of a larger bunch of colourful leaves, a bit more like April's. With that blue sky background, and there's those complementary colours again, that kind of yellowy orange against the blue becomes really vivid and stands out. Now again, you've got the backlight that kind of comes in, little bits of shadow coming, the different colours from the much more yellow leaves to the much more red tinted ones. It's really nicely colourful. Interestingly, though, as I zoom in like this, I start to think, you know what, I kind of prefer this as a composition. There's something about the square composition. Now, for Instagram, that's fine, it works. But given the way that everything's sort of sweeping down at this diagonal, I think in a way, I'm not too different from what I was talking about John with his trees, that there's something where I think this is going to work slightly better if you had a little bit more out to the left, or really, we don't want too much sky, but we want some sky. And I think if you were to sort of take it something like this, maybe just bring that down a little bit. We don't want too much sky here, but a patch of it. And we just can't, you're moving it up and down. I mean, I'm just moving this on the screen. You could maybe open it in Photoshop and just play around with the crop. But something like this, I think, works really well in a kind of a landscape format. And all these these twigs that are coming down in these kind of sweeping diagonals, I think, just sort of scream out for this idea of having that space to kind of flow into, if that makes sense. So yeah, I would toy around with the crop with this one, Nurije. I think that you can enhance what you've got here by just that kind of zooming in and cropping a little bit. Something to play with. What have we got? Lisa says, I like how the leaves frame the sky. Viji says, blue sky and yellow on orange leaves. Perfect duo. The white cloud is a beautiful match as well. Susan says, great image, Nurije. That cloud knew just when to make an appearance. Viji likes the crop, and Nicola says, nice shot. The texture of the clouds in the blue sky helped to direct the eye to the subject. Excellent. Right, okay, where are we at now? So now we're on to Robert Gallick, who sent in this one. And here we've gone full landscape with this. And Robert says, this is a photo I took last year in the Tennessee Smoky Mountain on a Dallas Camera Club field trip. I like it because of the colour pattern and the diagonals that the smoke and tree patterns create. It's not something that I see very often, but it is common there. And this is really dramatic, and I like that notion of taking the idea of the leaf but spreading it across an entire landscape, half a mountainside or whatever, and all the colours are really coming out. Now, I think the diagonals are great. The way the clouds are kind of wisping across at the diagonal, even like the diagonal of that sort of patches of yellow coming down as well, and the way the leaves are. Yeah, there's lots of it. There creates an energy and a drive. We said before, you know, verticals and horizontals tend to stabilize an image. Diagonals tend to add an energy, dynamism to an image. Again, for my taste, there's a slight sense of overcooked with the colouring. The colouring, you want something like this to have nice to bring out the colours, but I'm sort of a slight feeling kind of just slightly overdone, toned back slightly. Having said that, I mean, Robert did send me the raw file with this, and I can see from that just how much editing he's done to bring out the colours, because it was taken on a fairly dullish day. You don't get the colours as rich as you would like them to have. So we richen them in the editing process. But there is a slight problem with the fact that, you know, the sun, well, it looks slightly like that you're getting a little bit of sunlight hitting them, but it's not quite. It's an edited version of it, and it's just, I know there's rich colours there, but they just feel just that little bit overcooked. And I think just pulling it back a little bit, playing around with the edge a little bit, and I think would just make it sit slightly more comfortable. But again, having said that, part of that depends on where it's being seen, because if you're just putting this online in one of these kind of guru shots type or viewbug type scenarios, then actually you probably do want that slightly boosted colour. But I do love the idea, and I love the concept, and I love most of what you've got here with that notion of the whole trees and the different coloured trees just sort of standing out in amongst the landscape, and you're getting the patterns of how the yellows fall together, the little spaces of the oranges and the reds, and it all spread in amongst the greens as well. Comments here. Viji says, oh my. Lisa says, gorgeous. Viji says, looks like wallpaper. Susan says, oh well, these are gorgeous trees. Dramatic Robert. Other Robert says, great shot, Robert. John says, great landscape shot in a great area. Mark 5101. I'll call you Mark for the moment. But welcome. Thank you for joining us. A photo is a photo. Editing is great fun and all, but once that is done, it is no longer a photo. Can we all agree on that? Oh, that's an interesting one. Okay, let's engage with that for a moment, because this is one of those comments that I've come across before. Well, one of these debates that I've come across before, which is, and I can understand where it comes from, which is this idea: you've got a camera, you take a photo. The photograph is the light hitting the sensor, and that gives you a photograph. Then you get into editing the photograph, and some will say that at that point it stops being a photo because you are editing. The debate on the other side of that is that, well, first of all, depending on the sensor, depending on the camera you've got, that's already making an impact and choices of deciding what counts as what counts as, you know, how bright are the reds going to be, how bright are the greens going to be, things like that. But there's also this idea of, does editing necessarily make it worse? So an analogy for you, Mark, is the idea. So right, it says Marcy, not Mark. Okay, oh sorry, I'll call you Marcy. Okay, so the analogy here then, Marcy, is that imagine a poem. Is your first draft, the first thing that comes out of your head that you scribble onto the piece of paper, is that the most authentic version of the poem? Or would you take that as a starting point and then start tidying it up a bit? And most people, I think, would generally feel that it's your starting point. It's where you're what you're creating from that. Now, there are different, I will give you, absolutely, there's different ways of interpreting the photo. Different people want to have that point. We will all draw a line in slightly different places as to what feels acceptable and what isn't. So, so earlier on, I was talking about Lisa's picture of feeling where she created an art texture over the top that I felt she'd moved too far away from photography by making it look just a bit too much like a painting. This picture of Robert's, I felt that the editing had just kind of overcooked it a bit more, so it stopped looking as authentic as a photo. But that notion of editing, I don't overly see a problem with. There's the degree of editing. Everybody's, like I say, is going to draw a different line at it, but I don't think there's anything inherently wrong in editing. And editing has been done for as far back as photography has been created. Since photography was done on glass plates, people have been touching up the glass plates. Even the negatives, when you've got a negative you would shine the light through the negative to make your print. People have been dodging and burning and making adjustments. So that notion of editing has been there all the time. And if you go back pre-photography to painting, well, painting is entirely editing. You paint this in and then maybe you shift it to left or right, you enhance these colours, you take it back a bit. So I think, yes, you can draw a line if you want to be absolutely purist, but then which camera are you using? Which sensor are you using? Is it right to say, well, okay, I know this, Nikon treats green slightly differently than the way Canon does. But then you get a RAW file. If you get a RAW file, generally speaking, is quite dull. RAW file is there, sitting there, ready to be edited. So depending on the camera you're using, depending on the lens you're using, depending on the sensor, the programs, everything else, the idea of a pure photo, somehow untouched by anything, I don't think really exists. So I think that notion of editing is viable and legitimate as a part of the photographic process, in the same way printing is. That you can print in different ways. So you can take your photo and you print it up, but if you use this paper rather than that paper, if you use these inks rather than those inks, you're going to get a different effect. So which is the real one? Which is the most authentic one? There isn't actually a single authentic one. What there is a whole series of choices. And then depending on your particular aesthetic and your particular sense of where you draw the line on what you consider to be going too far, I think that's going to vary from person to person. So it's a really interesting debate. We certainly do an entire podcast series on where that line gets drawn and for different people and why they would argue where that point is. But I hope that kind of gives you sort of some insight into that notion that is not necessarily a given that the moment you start editing a photo, it stops being a photo. I think you can still have the bit whereby you can use the editing to enhance the photo rather than taking it away from being a photo. Okay, so what else? Let's come back and take a look at that. So Lisa says, I once learned that Ansel Adams edited in the darkroom. I was fine with digital cameras. Yeah, there's a lot of old film photographers who would talk about the fact that they felt that 95% of the photo happened in the darkroom. So it is a form of editing. Marcy says, thank you for the welcome. Susan says, me too, Lisa. Oh, Tomato Sandwich. Welcome, Tomato Sandwich. Says, hi here, first time. We've always edited photos since film. Personally, as long as things are not cloned out or AI removed, it's still a photo. Okay, right, yes. So that's another common place to be. Robert Schaefer says, film images are and have been edited by the person processing. How much depends on them. Nicola says she likes the poem analogy, as does Lisa. Okay, Marcy says, I'm a writer also. I do agree with what you're saying. I'm not slamming editing, just my humble opinion. There is a point where editing becomes an artistic representation of the photo. Yep, that's a good point. Robert says, editing is just bringing out more of what is already there. Viji says, post-production is a part of photography since the analog camera age. And so, yes, I think, as you can see, that there's a lot of different kind of ideas on this. And it also depends on how you're using that image as well, and how you place yourself as in your own head, what you are as a photographer. So some photographers, I think if you're calling yourself, say, a documentary photographer, so what I am doing is I'm using the camera to document specifically what's there. Then if you start removing things, whether it's cloning, or just darkening down something or cropping something out in order to change the narrative, then your influence on that it can be quite profound. And having said that, as a documentary photographer, the fact that you've decided to take from that angle rather than from that angle has automatically, you've made a decision as to what you're including and what you're not. There's a notion, this idea that the camera never lies, I always tend to feel is wrong. The camera is incapable of telling the truth. We perceive events in 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions, because we perceive them through time. A camera perceives things in 2 dimensions, flat and in a single moment. So a camera can only perceive the world with half the number of dimensions that the human does, that the brain and the eye perceives. Consequently, anything you photograph is not an actual real it's a representation of, it's an interpretation of, rather than an actual documentary of. So we can get really philosophical about this, and actually, if I'm not careful, I will run away for the next hour and a half talking about this. But I suppose there's the rest of the podcast. But yeah, keep coming back, keep bringing your ideas, and thanks for bringing that one up though, because I think it is an interesting point that you make there, Marcy. What else we got? Viji says manipulating images loses the magic in photography, though, and Marcy says great show, by the way. Oh, thank you, I appreciate that. Well, again, the notion actually, Viji, when you say manipulation loses the magic in a photograph, it depends what you're doing. Because if you've got a particular point, for those who know my photography, a lot of the big staged narrative photos that I do, there's a huge amount of editing goes into those. And what I'm doing there is because I would call myself a narrative or a storytelling photographer at that point. And in a way, I'm echoing more what painters would do by taking elements and placing them together to create a particular image and tell a particular story. I'm not attempting to be a documentary photographer. I'm not saying that what you see in front of you is truth. What I'm saying is what in front of you is a story. And that sometimes stories can tell a deeper truth than the facts alone can. But again, that's kind of going off on the philosophical side of it. I think different photos require different levels of editing, require different levels of interpretation, and a lot of it depends on where they're being placed and who's going to be viewing them. So yeah, plenty to explore. And Susan says, wow, that's a whole can of worms. Very interesting discussion. Yeah, Susan, get me back along to the camera club and we can debate that one at some point. I'm sure there are plenty in Stewardship Camera Club who have very strong opinions on that. Lisa says that Susan, very interesting indeed. Okay, great. So next up, actually, let's go on to Susan's picture. Now, Susan, it sent in this one. She says, I attach my submission for the Leaves Challenge. You are justifiably correct in your assumption that at the end of previous Sunday's podcast that I would enter a still life. Well, it is your spec. You're very good at your still life, Susan. And she says, this is an image I took following my walk looking for leaves to photograph. I didn't have to go far though, as these leaves are growing on an acer in my garden. I have several acers of different varieties, but these are certainly the most dramatic today. I popped the leaves into one of my favourite little vases, placed it in a photo box, lit from the side and photo stacked in camera. Looking forward to seeing some stunning autumn coloured leaves on Sunday. So yeah, this is a lovely still life, bright colours, the white, so minimalist colour scheme. So we've got the grey blacks background, and we've got the reds, we've got the white of the vase. Now, Susan says, I should point out that the little vase is only actually 2 inches high. Gosh, okay. That's a small vase. You're right. You would have no sense of size or scale on this one. That's really interesting. There's also an interesting thing here, actually, just to flip back to the point that Marcy was bringing up, because there's a line in Susan's description here, which is, where are we? You were doing photos, yes, lit from the side and photo stacked in the camera. So what that means is this isn't a single image. This is multiple images, if I'm interpreting you rightly, Susan. And what you do, especially when quite often, if you're working around with a small object and you're having to go almost like with a macro lens potentially, that your depth of field is never going to be very big. So you take a whole set of photos where you focus in slightly different places, and then you can stack them in the software so it appears to be sharp from front to back, as is the case of this. So it looks and acts as though it's a single image. Oh, yeah, Susan says, yes, it's an 8 image. So actually, while it looks and feels exactly like a photo, by Marcy's original definition of once you've done anything with it, it's no longer a photo, this wouldn't count. Fun. Okay. Now, to come back to sort of essentially the photography of this, Susan. Lovely colours, lovely lighting. What strikes me, though, is I tend to feel that the balance feels slightly off. And by that, what I mean is we've got the light coming in from the left side of the photo here. And then we've got the leaves tumbling down to the right. And that's quite interesting, a nice kind of shape. And you've got your extra leaf sitting down here. And so we've got this lovely curve that kind of comes round, echoing the curve of around the vase. And we've got the textures, and that's nice. But the light, as it comes in, is coming in from the left. And what that's doing is it's drawing our eye to the left side of the picture, whereas actually quite a large part of what makes this photo is the way the leaves fall down to the right. And I think what happens is our eye gets drawn over here and we kind of miss a little bit, or our attention gets drawn back here rather than over here. And it feels like almost like everything fits slightly too far over to how to put it? Yeah, the light comes in here, our eyes hit here. This acts more like a frame, a back, and it feels like everything's sort of sitting too far to the left of the photo. In a way, I want to have a bit more space over to the left of it. I'll tell you what, let's just open this in Photoshop for a moment, see if I can play around with what I mean by that. I just close that one of Nadia's. So if we were to take this, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this out using content aware fill. So we're no longer in the realms of photography, we are in the realms of a little bit of Photoshop manipulation, but this is just to put the point across. If I was to take this out a little bit more here, actually if I'm doing this, I'll have to do this step by step, because content aware fill will quite often grab other bits of the photo that I don't necessarily want it to. And I pull it out, say, a little bit more over here and sort of move this vase slightly. And it also feels like it's very, very, very close to the edge. I feel like I want to give it a little bit more room to breathe over something like that. Now, I think I feel slightly happier with that. Maybe there is too much space, not sure. I kind of want to, play around a little bit, pull that in maybe a little bit more. But there's, hang on a sec, I need to rearrange the workspace a sec. I should have done that earlier so that I'm not covering up the photo with my head in the corner here. I think something like this actually tends to feel a bit slightly better. I mean, if we go back to your original here, it just feels very tight in on the edges, whereas having a little bit more space to breathe. And I think then allowing for the fact that because you've got such a bright part here, by placing that bright part more in the center rather than heavy over to the left, I think it allows the kind of feel of the shape as such kind of sits a little bit better. I think, again, open to personal interpretation here, Susan. I don't know quite how you feel about that. Having said that, I mean, there's so much to like about this, but it just feels that on your original, it feels very kind of tight in to the edges, needing a little bit more space. But I definitely feel it benefits more with more space to the left because of the direction that the light is coming from. So hope you find that interesting. Where were we? Viji says leaf on the floor looks a bit like an insect. Robert says it's not a photo, it's 8 photos. Marcy says photo stacking is fantastic. I personally do not count that as editing. You see, this is interesting. Where do you draw the line? Everybody's got a slightly different idea of what they consider to be editing and what isn't. Meg says, absolutely beautiful. Marcy says, I remember stacking when shooting film. Yes, I'm old. Susan says, totally agree with your edit, Kim. Thanks. Okay, excellent. Right. Well, thank you for sending that one in, Susan. Now, on to the final image, but then I'm going to show you something else. Don't rush off too quickly, because there's something else interesting that I really want to show you here. But what we're going to do before we do that is here's Viji. Viji's picture. Now, Viji is in Chennai, where they don't have the same kind of autumnal change, but she did find a dried up leaf within a plant. And Viji says, here's my submission for the Leaves Challenge. I took this shot in our backyard. It was an interesting subject and caught my attention. It was a curled leaf snugly curled inside another. I took a shot from my balcony when it was still green and another after 3 or 4 days when it was completely dried up. I thought of waiting a couple more days to take a shot, maybe even submit a triptych to a challenge in the future. Alas, it disappeared the next day. It should have dropped off. I tried searching on the ground, but in vain. Perhaps it caught somewhere between the first and ground floors. I've been monitoring it closely for almost a week, after which it disappeared. Let's make the leaf immortal by submitting it to this challenge. So, and in fact, actually, Viji sent this. This was another version of when the leaf was a little bit greener. This is a lower resolution version and slightly out of focus, but shows you as to the point where Viji realised that the leaf was starting to change, was curling in on itself, and then we get to this one, which is much sharper, much clearer. There's much more contrast now between the brown of the leaf and the green in the background. The veins are really kind of standing of the leaves are really standing out nicely. Lots of lovely texture in that. So yeah, that's great. So you don't, back to this thing, you don't have to necessarily be in the either new spring leaf growth or autumnal leaf change. You don't have to have that seasonal change in order to find interesting leaves and contrast. And and it is about the contrast, in this case having the brown against all the green that's around it. So yes, thank you for sending that one in, Viji. Where are we? Meg says absolutely beautiful. Oh, we're wet now. Soon says Soon says, I love the curl of the leaf at Viji. Right. Trying to work my way through where people are in the comments. Right. Now, what I wanted to show you next is this notion. There's an interesting point here of how images stand out, and the difference to go back to some of the bits we've already touched on, which is where they are going to appear and how they are presented. So what I want to do here is let's flick you back over to an empty screen, and I'm going to bring over my little folder here with all the images, and let's just go to where's the view, these as extra large icons. Okay, so what you can see here, in fact, actually, I'll tell you what, so that I'm not blocking all of them. Let me just drag this over here to a point whereby hopefully I'm not blocking any of the images. But that you can still see all of them. Can we do that? Something like that, I think. And the only one that I'm covering now is John's original, the one that wasn't being included anyway. Okay, now we've got a sense of this. This is what I want you to do here. This is all the images from today sent in with a couple of extras of John's original, Nadia's original, Viji's secondary one, and Nicola's original. And what I want you to do is I want you to think what leaps out at you. And to my mind, what immediately leaps out is, well, it's two that kind of, they all do. The first one that really grabs the attention, I think, is Nadia's here in the middle. That bright red and yellow is screaming for attention. What also then grabs our attention is maybe Robert's blue. And the reason that grabs us here is because there isn't anything else with that richness of blue. Now, there's a little bit of blue underneath with Marilyn's, but because everything else is by and large greens and reds, it tends to be that deeper blue of Robert's that is also grabbing the attention. When we look at this, things like this landscape by Robert Gulick, you barely notice. Your eye just skims past it. It's all those subtleties which, when blown up big, look so good. All that shape and colour. When squashed down to this big on your screen, it doesn't stand out. Okay. Also, we'll notice that, to go back to Nicola's unedited version, where you've got the brighter yellows and greens and the red, stands out more than the edited version. Okay. Janet's leaf up here doesn't stand out as much on this page. Now, if the rest of this page was blues and greens, Janet's picture would stand out massively. The point I'm trying to make here is about how an image is presented, where it is presented, the size of which is presented, what else it's up against, makes a huge difference as to how it is immediately perceived. Now, when we look at these pictures, we've spent the last hour or so talking about each of these photos. And while Nurije's was nice and comfortable, colourful, actually, when we looked at it big, it was lacking the detail. It felt like she zoomed in and cropped, and if that had been in a place whereby you were just looking at it on a full screen or even printed up, it wouldn't carry the weight. On a small screen like this, suddenly it's the one that grabs the attention. At this size, any little tiny editing imperfections, absolutely unnoticeable on Robert's or anybody else's pictures. Viji's picture, the brown against the green, doesn't stand out quite as much at a smaller level. The darker red against the grey has kind of got lost at a smaller level. Now, the point of what I want to make across about this is the fact that none of these pictures is inherently wrong or right or bad or whatever. That's not what this bit of conversation is about. This is about how it's being presented, and to understand when you've put in your photo into these competitions, into these challenges, into online, especially the online ones where people are scrolling through lots of images, like ViewBug, PhotoCrowd, Guru Shots, these kind of things, then your images are appearing in amongst a whole bunch of other images. And at that point, very often, subtlety gets lost. So where and how your image is presented makes a massive difference as to how it's going to be received. So a photo that could do really well in a situation like this might not do very well in, say, a camera club situation where it's printed and you've got somebody spending several seconds or even a minute or two looking at it. And vice versa. Okay, so you could have an image that looks brilliant when you've got the time to really study it, but loses and doesn't work when it's just a small little thumbnail on a screen and somebody skimming past it, barely giving it a quarter of a second's attention. So with that in mind, I just wanted to kind of point that out, that I thought that was kind of an interesting idea to keep in mind. So, Marcy says, I hope to be part of the next challenge. Well, excellent. I'm glad you've subscribed. Keep joining in. We've got a Facebook group. If you happen to be on Facebook, look up Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. You can join us there as well. Okay, now, what I'm going to do now, we've kind of... before I get on to what we're doing next week, now's the time for the judging. Okay, so I've made up my mind as to which photos that I'm going to award some extra smug points to, but you get your crowd vote first. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to run through each of the photos, make a personal note of which one you think you feel deserves the to win the crowd vote on this, and then we'll get to the end and then write them in. I'll give you a minute or so to put your image in once we get to the end. So first of all, what we're going to do, just to remind everybody, this one from April of the autumn leaves in the parking lot in the morning that she got to work. Second up, we've got Robert Schaefer's picture of the leaf in the swimming pool. Thirdly, we've got Jack's picture of the red leaf against the green background. Next up, we have Janet's frosty picture of the leaf with all the red leaf with the frost around it. Next up, we have John's picture of the leaves changing in the park. Then we have Lisa's still life with the leaves coming out, falling off out of the vase, with an added texture to give it a more painterly feel. Then we have Marilyn's picture of the leaves, just 5 leaves hanging coming out of the twig with the blue sky background. Next up, we have Meg's picture of the street scene with all the leaves over the pavement or sidewalk, and the perspective vision looking down the street, the high street of Castle Douglas. Then we have Nadia's picture with the red stalk and stems and veins against the yellow leaf with the light coming through behind it. Not that one. And then we have Nicola's picture of the leaves that was taken with the floating in the water with the light coming through the Pyrex dish, and then taking the layer and playing around with it to make it a little bit more abstract. Then we have Nurije's picture of the whole bunch of leaves set against the blue sky. We have Robert's landscape with all the trees and the mist and the clouds coming down, skimming across the trees. We have Susan's still life of the acer leaves sitting in the 2-inch vase. And we have Viji's picture of the curled, dried leaf up against the others. So now what I would like you to do is just drop just your first choice. Don't give me a 1, 2, 3 or anything like that. I'm just going to add up the first ones and get a sense. So scribble into the comments, please, which one you think should get the crowd vote out of these ones, and then I will tell you which ones I'm personally choosing. But at this point, while you're sort of plonking that down, putting your ideas in, I will say thank you to everybody who sent in the images. It's been really fascinating, and that's what I love about these challenges. I always find them fascinating, how you can take a particular topic, a word, a concept, and how everybody will apply their own unique vision to it. It's one of those things we can sometimes kind of feel like, well, you know, what is there with photography? Everything's been photographed. Everything's been photographed in a particular way. Where can I find a bit of originality? But your originality is you. Your originality is the way you see the scene. That we can have 5 people stand in front of exactly the same thing and photograph it, but we will all interpret what we're seeing and how we will photograph it in a completely different way. And ultimately, that's it's the development of your own eye and your own aesthetic, which is then what makes your photos unique to you. Okay, we're getting it's coming in, last chance to start. Put down whichever one you think is best, and then I will do a little tot up and see what we've got here. Either not everybody is voting or some people have had to leave early. Right, what have we got? So Viji has said Janet's her first choice. Janet has said Nadia's her first choice. Robert's gone for the other Robert. Then we've got Janet, Susan, Robert, Susan. Right, oh, okay, so I'm going to have to add these ones up. So Janet has got 1, 2... Janet's got 2 as a first. Robert Schaefer has 1, 2, 3. Susan has 1, 2, 3. Nadia's got 2. Tomato Sandwich likes Marilyn's photo, although there were many good photos. Okay, so we've got a draw here then, I think, between Susan's stacked photo and Robert's leaf in the pool. And Janet, was it Janet with the frosty leaves? Sorry, let me just... I'm suddenly mixed up here with Marilyn, and yes, it was Janet with the frosty leaves. So there's 3 for Janet as well. Oh no, there's 2 for Janet, 1 for Marilyn. Right, okay, yes, that's right. Okay, so it's a draw then. It's a tie between Susan and her stacked leaves and Robert and his leaf in the pool. So, okay, then I will just make a note of that both Robert and Susan tie and get a bonus 20 smug points each. So thank you very much for that. So what will I do then? So what are my choices? Okay, so I had a little bit to think, and one of the where am I? Let's do that. So I found it really difficult. I kind of kept coming back to it, and as with all these things, I would generally catch me on a different day, catch me on a different hour, and I would probably do them slightly differently. But what I'm going to do is my first place is going to April. I think there's just something about, I think it was the first one that really grabbed me, and it's sort of kind of a quintessential autumn leaf kind of. I just love the colours. I love the way they come through. I love even the idea that it's just grabbed on the way to work. So yeah, there's all sorts of different ways we can come at this and all sorts of different criteria. But in the end, April is getting my bonus 30 smug points. Second up then, this was so difficult. Basically, I've got a tie myself for the second one. So my second tie is, one of them is Nicola, because I just love the whole idea of the way that she's played and experimented and gone for the light and gone for the play, you know, the Pyrex dish and the water. I just think it's a brilliant, brilliant idea. So, and along with Nicola, Marilyn, where are we? Yes. Okay, this one from Marilyn, there's just a beautiful simplicity. It's leaves, a little bit of light just catching it, the blue sky in the background. Again, it just, as I saw it, my heart just went, yes. So Marilyn and Nicola are getting my tied for second place. So you'll both get 20 smug points each on that. And third place, again, I kind of found myself having a tie on this one. And so Susan, really loved the still life, really loved the colour. It is lovely. Yes, I would adjust it slightly with the thing, but I like it. And the other one is Viji's leaf. There's something rather beautiful about that curled, dried leaf sitting there in amongst the greenery of the other plant. I just lovely, lovely texture. So Susan and Viji tie in third place for a bonus 10 smug points each. But what I'm also going to do, though, is both Roberts in Texas, I'm going to give you commendeds. The leaf in the pool definitely grabs me, and I like that landscape as well from the other Robert. I mean, everybody's done extraordinarily well. Thank you to everybody for sending in their images. So hopefully that, anyway, yes, thank you to everyone for sending an image. Hopefully you're all feeling a little bit more inspired by the way that you can approach the humble leaf and multiple ways that you can do the photography. So next week is going to be a feedback session. Okay, so if you would like to take part, there is no there's no topic as such. You can do this for any photo you want. So if this is one of those few places on the internet where you can get feedback for free. Interestingly, I noticed that, I think it's ViewBug has started introducing a place where you can start looking for critique and feedback on your images, and you pay about $60 or something like that to be able to get an expert to look at your photo. Here, it's free. Send me your image. If you would like feedback on your photo, send your image. You can either email me, kim@kimayres.co.uk, or join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/UPwKA, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, or the Flickr group, UPwKA. Place your image in there. Tell me a bit about the photo. Tell me what kind of feedback you're looking for, what your sticking point is. If you can, send me either the raw file or an unedited JPEG along with it as well, because an unedited version always gives me an option to see how we might have edited the photo slightly differently. So send me your image and I can give you genuine feedback on how I think you might have tackled it differently, whether it's the way you might have taken the photo, the narrative of it, the editing of it, or anything else. But you tell me what kind of guidance you're looking for and I will do that. And so next week then, I've got space for up to about 4 images. So whoever gets their images in first, I send me your images and I will give you the feedback on them in next week's podcast. What I will also do is, after this podcast, I'm going to sit and do the adding up of who's got how many smug points added onto the accumulative month, and then I'll be in touch with whoever is in lead for that, who gets to choose the topic for November. So, hope that all makes sense. Thank you once again to everybody for sending their images in. So what have we got? Last set of comments is everybody sort of saying congratulations to everybody else after who's been voted for. And yeah, I think that's pretty much us and people saying thank you and all the rest. So yes, thank you once again to everybody. And that feels like it's been quite a podcast, this one. Lots of interesting images, and thanks for the debate from Marcy as well. Really interesting one. So yeah, look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care. Enjoy yourselves. Bye bye.